And today I'm joined by Jacqueline Hollows, also known as JB Hollows, who has written this book, Wing of an Angel, and she's also the founder of Beyond Recovery. And welcome, Jacqueline. Nice to see you, and thanks for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
And so how did you get into writing Wing of an Angel? What was the inspiration?
So it's interesting. I never thought of myself as a writer. In fact, I think I say at the beginning of Wing of an Angel, I never thought I'd come to much. And I was certainly never intending to write a book. And then I was doing work in prisons, sharing innate health understanding with people in prison. And I was doing that for 10 years. And I really, luckily, got asked to speak at different events around the world. And every time I came off stage, someone would say, when are you writing your book? And I'd always say, I'm not going to write a book. Anyway, that got asked of me many, many times. And anybody who's worked in prisons knows that there's no tech, really. So everything is manual notes and so on. So whenever I used to get home from running groups, I'd actually document, just for my own reasons, everything that had happened, what had happened in group, the people that I'd worked with, the stories that I'd heard, my own perspective. I did even little stick drawings, of what we'd put on the whiteboard. So I had boxes and boxes of notes. Then in 2018, a friend of mine who's a prolific author said, come on, it's time for you to write your book. And she tried to get me on a writing course and on a writing retreat on a barge. And I just wasn't having any of it. But interestingly, after that, you know how sometimes you just suddenly then start to see writing courses and writing retreats? They all kept popping up in my feed. And somebody else introduced me to someone and said, I think that you would really like this woman. And I said, no, I'm not doing that, I'm not doing that. Anyway, long story short, I got introduced to this woman 3 times. And so I thought, okay, something's going on here. And it turns out that her ex-partner actually had been an offender in a US prison. And so I felt like she would understand my story. And she also had trauma in her background. So I felt like she would understand my story. So I spoke to her, and she actually came to my home. And I said, well, I think I might have a book here. And I had these 4 boxes of just notes, random notes. And she was very kind. And she said, oh, yeah, there's possibly a story there, And so that it got me interested in what might that look like. And she actually set me off by saying, outline the journey. And I did it on big Post-it notes around my spare bedroom, outline the journey, put timescales, and then put what you've learned along the way. So I had all these big pieces of paper with the journey of the prison system and the things that had happened in my life during that time, and then Post-it notes of insights and what I'd learned along the way. And that was the starting point, really. But that was in 2019. It took me 4 years to actually birth the book, as they say.
So there's a character in your book called Angel. Would you like to talk a bit about his journey in the book?
Yeah, sure. First of all, you mentioned about it being part memoir as well.
Yeah.
When I did my first draft and handed it in, the writing coach said, actually, it's lovely, it's great, but the story was all about the transformations that I'd seen in the people that I'd worked with. And she said, you're not in it. And I was very resistant to writing my story. There's a lot of shame about my past and a lot of difficult things to talk about. And I really didn't want to, but she said, you can't put a book into the world without you being in it. That's what people will resonate with. And so I ended up writing a separate book about my story and then mingling the two, which made it a better book. And then in 2020, as it happens, in December 2020, the book was ready. And I, in part, wanted it to honour the work that I'd been doing and honour the people that I'd worked with. And one of the people that I'd been working with got in touch and said he didn't want to be in the book. And he was actually a central character. And so I thought, well, that's it. I can't publish. They can publish it when I'm dead, is what I thought, dramatically. And so I just put the manuscript in the drawer and I thought, well, that's it. It doesn't work without him. And a few months later, I was because I joined a writing school to improve my writing. And a few months later, I was in the writing school and they were talking about characters. And I thought, well, why don't I just have some composite characters then? I don't have to have the real people in there. And so I started thinking about that, and it made it a lot of tighter story, because instead of saying this facilitator did that and trying to honour her, I took all that out and I just wrote it from my perspective, the stories that I'd heard. And I was in the supermarket, as you do, and I was just waiting in the checkout, and a voice came in my head, and it was Angel's voice, and Angel said, "You have to tell my story." And I literally just put the shopping bag down, went home and sat down to write. And I've never experienced this before. People talk about channeling writing. It was like that. I literally just wrote his story. And it was from things that he'd told me. So he is a real person, but he has been disguised. And I wrote a chapter, and then I laid the book out, and then he kept telling me where his chapters needed to be. So he told his story through me. It was quite a dramatic story, of course, and yes, and then ultimately he ended up working with me.
I went on that course with you with Ria, and I had a similar experience when I was doing some had to do, and it freaked me out. It was like I was just kept writing, and to the point where when Ria was asking us to tell the group what we've been writing about, I went into my head and was almost embarrassed to talk about it, because it's had that sort of big an impact on me. It was like being haunted or something. It was a really strange experience, but I had exactly the same thing. Yeah,
exactly right. And when Ria and the writing coach talk about that, they're saying that it's when you get out of the way, it comes through you. That's exactly the experience. And it can be a little bit discombobulating, because you don't really, you think, oh, is this okay to read this? But actually that's the most powerful writing that you can do.
It was a very strange experience. You just reminded me of that experience myself. And so you started, you had your first contract in the prisons in 2015, is that right? Can you tell me what your life looked like before then, say 2014, so 10 years ago today, what would you have been doing?
Oh, well, I was writing the proposal for the prison then.
All right, okay.
But just before that, so I'd spent most of my life and career in IT and customer services, and I'd sort of, reached a good title in that world and everything else. And that all crashed around the housing crash time, the bank crisis in 2009-10. And I'd been revamping myself as a coach. And I did a lot of training, NLP, EFT. I did some counselling training. And one of the trainings that I did as a coaching diploma was something called the 3 Principles. So I was thinking that I would work with high-powered people. I say in the book that I thought that I would be on Hawaii with sparkly sandals, and running all these workshops with rich and famous people. And I was trying to craft a career in that, if you like. And I did have 1 or 2 clients, but mainly the person who came into my life was someone who had been in addiction the whole of his life. He was a heroin addict or anything, he would say, and he'd been in and out of prison, and I ended up just volunteering for him. I thought he was amazing, and I volunteered for his company. He had a social enterprise helping people to make film and write scripts, and through him I met all these other people in addiction, and I just thought they were amazing. I saw the power of second chances. I saw the power. I saw the way that we can limit ourselves through what we believe. There's certainly stigma out there, but the most stigma is in here. And I really saw that in them. And although I hadn't really understood how the inside out understanding works, I saw it in them. And I just thought, well, I want to dedicate my life to working with these people because they're absolutely amazing and they deserve a second chance. And so that's where I started. And then I ended up then being offered to write a proposal for the prison. Never thought I would work in prison at all, and ended up getting this contract to deliver the services in prison. And that went until COVID times, really, and just a little bit afterwards.
And I know you've got an interesting story about the money that you were asking for when you first did your proposal. Would you like to talk about that?
I do. And I want to talk about this story because it's a real example of you're never ready. You're never ready and you're always ready. So, you know, I'm also subject to thinking, oh, do I know enough? And you just go for it. You never know enough, really. So, yeah, I went and did this demo, I suppose, and really struggled in this meeting trying to convince people that I was qualified to come and work with people in prison. And it happens that the person I was talking to was married to a forensic psychologist. So he was saying, well, how did they change? And I was saying, I don't know, I just have a conversation because I really didn't understand at that time how they changed. And the head of the NHS, head of nursing at the prison as well. So I had quite a hard time, but eventually at the end they said, well, you know, we'll give this a go. How much will it be? And I lived in Birmingham and the prison was in Rugby, so it was about 40, 50 miles away. And I hadn't thought about how much I would be charging because it just never occurred to me that they'd actually go for it. So I just went, 50 quid with £50 if you're not English. And they looked at each other and they went, we could afford that. Can you write a proposal for a 12-week programme? And I came out and thought, you idiot, that won't even cover my fuel costs. You know, what am I going to do? And then my husband said, well, say it was £50 an hour. And I knew that I wanted to work with them for 3 hours every session. So that was a bit more palatable. So I ended up writing a proposal and putting that in. And I didn't know about writing proposals. This is not my background at all. I just made it up, you know, and put what I thought in. And they came back to me and said the mental health team love it, but the psychologist not so much. And would you be willing to write a business case? They'd put it to the commissioner, and apparently there was an underspend in the local council, which obviously I didn't know about. And they said, we've got an underspend and we'd like you to put together a proposal for 12 months. So all of a sudden, I was in this situation where I had to write a business case, which I didn't know what a business case was, and writing a whole thing for 12 months. What was interesting, Anne-Marie, is that made me not so worried about the money because then I realised this is my job now. If I get this will be my job. And so therefore I need to charge enough for that. But I didn't know what a business case was. So I actually got in touch and said, what sort of headings would you like in a business case? And he was very kind and he told me, and I researched it. And it took me about, as I say, September 14, I would have been writing that. And I put the proposal in at Christmas. So it took me a few months to really write it and get it right. And there was no research at that time in the understanding. And so that was hard. And I put that proposal in, and the commissioner read it and got an insight and said, I think this is going to really help people. And I won the contract, and it was a 90 grand contract. So it was quite amazing, to go from 50 quid to 90,000. So I won a year's contract at the prison. And what I was in a time of my life where I really didn't want money. And so all I wanted to do was serve more people. So I brought in some volunteer facilitators eventually and just ran as many groups as we could. And like I say, we were going for 10 years nearly.
And what was your first group like, first group experience?
Horrendous. So in prison, you get, one of the things that we wanted was autonomy. So sometimes in prison with groups, you get escorted and someone sits in the room and so on. And I knew that if I really wanted to uncover the innate health of people, having an officer in the room wasn't going to help. And I also didn't want to be having to wait at the gate and, not get into the room. So I decided that we would get key trained, which involves a much higher level of security and training. And so I got key trained, which means that I was able to draw keys and have full access and draw a radio and so on. So I could have as much access to the prison as I needed. And part of that training, you have to go through like psychology training, and they tell you all the bad things that can happen. So all the fact that you could get held hostage, and what to do if somebody attacks you, and how people can make what they call a shank out of a pair of glasses or out of a pencil, and that you can't have chewing gum because somebody will cut a key, make a copy of a key, and so on. So they fill your head with all these bad things that can happen, including what to do if you see someone hanging. And so actually, my first day, I was petrified. And even though I wanted to do this work and I'd spent all these months training, I was stood there on the wing, and in prison, it is noisy, smelly, just not very nice, not like Hawaii.
No.
And I stood there thinking, what am I doing? I have no idea why I'm here. And it seemed like the TV, people were jumping over. They'd been locked up all weekend, so they were banging their cups on the doors, and it was noisy, and there was men coming out the cells with no tops on and jumping up and down. It was just like wild. And I just thought, this is crazy. I don't know what I'm going to do. And do you want me to tell about the chicks? Do you want me?
Yeah, the chicks is a nice story, yes.
And so I was stood there in my little uniform with my flip chart, and one of the rules is that you don't let anyone in the room who's not on your list. So I've got my list, and this big man comes up, and he looked like a prisoner to me, big, like huge guy, taps on his neck, and he said, "Can I come in, miss?" And I said, I actually thought, I hope he's not on the list. And I looked at my list and I said, what's your name? And he told me his name, and he wasn't on the list. And he said, I just want to see the chicks. And chicks is slang for women. And so I stood there like, he wants to see the chicks. Okay, don't know what to do. And I said, yeah, okay. Even though you're not allowed to. And he walked in, and the flip chart was in front of the windows, the barred windows, and he moved the flip chart out the way. And on the windowsill, you could see like all bars, really dirty windows, and then barbed wire. And on the windowsill of this really grimy place was a nest, and it was a dove's nest, and and there were eggs in the nest. And he wanted to see, had the eggs hatched yet before he gets out, because he's getting out in a week. And I always say that he saved the programme because he helped me to see how much invisible thinking we have, how much judgmental thinking we have, how even though I wanted to be there, I'd got this sort of level of anxiety and thinking about the very people that I wanted to work with, and that I wasn't seeing their souls and their essence. I was seeing their behaviour and what they looked like on the outside, and that just dropped away. And then because of him, I was able to see people as they really were when they came into the room, and they came in all shapes and sizes, to be fair.
Your own backstory has got a bit of trauma in it, and how did you feel revisiting that in your life as part of the book?
One of the things, so I'm a method writer.
Right.
And Jules Swales is a method writing teacher, so she's my writing coach. And one of the things that she taught us was that, sorry, I'll backtrack a little bit. So
okay.
as a 3 principles practitioner, it appeared to me that when you get over trauma, you just don't go there again in your mind, because you're done, you're over that, and you don't go there again. What the writing teaching did was it had me revisit some of those old traumas and situations, but from a space of knowing that I'm safe right now. And Jules talks about it as the things that have happened to you are like your colour palette, and you can draw from that, and you can bring that emotion into the world. And without doing that, you're really writing at a very surface level. So during her writing classes, without really before the book, during her writing classes, I actually went very dark. I've got a very dark side to me, which really surprised me. And we talked earlier about that channeling writing. Well, when you sit down to write with nothing on your mind and you just see what comes, actually what used to come for me was some very dark stuff. And it surprised me at first and sort of upset me at first, for what's wrong with me. But actually what I realised is you need the dark for the light. And whilst I've spent most of my life appearing, light and breezy and optimistic, that there is a dark side to that. And it actually helped me marry the two and feel more whole and more together. So that by the time I came to writing my own story, I could revisit those places. I could write from that space and bring all the angst and upset forward and so on. But then in the knowing that when I've stopped writing that, I'm not there and I'm safe, and I'm not revisiting the situation. I'm just revisiting the story in my mind, and I can let go of that just as quickly. So I think a combination of using that to sort of dig deep and find that colour palette and be able to write about those things, because who hasn't experienced trauma, who hasn't experienced grief, who hasn't experienced upset, and people can resonate with that. But if I was just to write about all the good stuff, then there's no depth to the story. But then knowing that I can just, take care of myself, and actually it doesn't hang around. So it was a really good combination of understanding that our reality is being created in the moment, but also our past it's okay to revisit your past, and you don't have to bring along the trauma to now. Does that make sense?
It does. And I know people in my own life, and I've been guilty of doing this myself, where it's very easy to hold on to the past and keep revisiting it and talking about it. And how do you think, because I'm thinking of an individual who does still do that to a certain extent, talks about things from decades ago like it's now, and I think they still feel the same emotions that they felt then. Yes. How do you think, how can somebody who's in that sort of habitual way of thinking, how do you think they can bring themselves out of it?
So I think that the person who's with the person with trauma, first of all, if they see that they're whole and it's okay that they're revisiting their trauma, that's what I would say. So if it's you, for instance, if you're sitting with that person and you cannot be afraid of them going there, you can help them just by being like that. Because if you're not afraid there's a level of them that can feel your not afraidness. What happens is, and we saw this over and over again in prison, is when people revisit their trauma, the people listening get afraid too. And then that proves to them, oh, this is really bad, and they hang on to it even tighter.
What I tend to do is the latter, yeah.
And you're just trying to be helpful.
Yeah.
But what happens is there's a resistance then. Like you're not understanding my story, and so now I have to dig even deeper and hold on to it. So what I found was it was really helpful to be very neutral, to listen with compassion, and to really allow the person to out whatever it is that they want to talk about, and validate you had that direct experience. You're living with that direct experience right now. And when they're ready, when there's a glimpse of a question or a glimpse of something that and there always will be, if you give resistance to people, they give you resistance back. But if you give an open space of just listening and not judging and allowing, what tends to happen is they settle, and in the settling, they might say, I wish I didn't have to live with this, or whatever, some clue or some sign, and then you go with that. Well, what might that look like? Rather than trying to fix it for them by shutting it down. I remember one time in one of the prisons, what happened was one of the lads, once he understood that thought was creating his reality, his words, he opened the door to thought, and he'd been blocking thoughts. So he opened the door to thought, and then all these thoughts came in, which he'd experienced a psychotic breakdown, and he'd actually done, quite a terrible crime, and it had opened the door to that, and he felt like he was having this psychotic breakdown again. So he was really going over and over, and one of the facilitators, and we wanted to fix it for him, wanted to make him feel better. And the facilitator I was working with, she said, if only we could not be afraid of our experience, then the world would be different. And this is a direct quote from Sid Banks. So she said it into the room, if we're not afraid of his experience, then his experience can change. So we all settled down, and I thought, that's brilliant, well done. And he was still having this terrible experience, and they left the room, and apparently he sought out some drugs to calm down. But the next day he came back, and he said, what happened was, because we didn't try to change it for him, he ran with it. And then at some point he thought, well, hang on a minute. I opened the door, so I can close the door. Or I could just have the door open a little crack and let the thoughts in bit by bit. And that made sense to him. And that's what he did. And he let the thoughts in a little bit, and then he closed the door again. And he found a way of dealing with them just in the moment. Now, I couldn't have come up with that for him. But because we weren't afraid of, he's just having this experience, it's okay, he's okay underneath this experience, he was able to have insight around it. And he had to go and medicate and so on initially. But that feeling of knowing that we weren't trying to change anything gave him the freedom of seeing something different.
Reminded me of, I was on one of your Zoom workshops a couple of years ago, probably now, and I was complaining about, and I won't go into the detail, but I said, I was going out in the back garden having a cigarette, and I don't even really smoke, and I was smoking so many cigarettes at that point, just because he was winding me up so much. And I took a photo of, there's an issue with parking. I took a photo while I was sitting at my computer of it and put it on the WhatsApp group. And Katie took the photo and put a cartoon of a dog on it and sent it back to me. And I don't know what it did. It did something to my head, but it just totally changed my point of view about that situation, to the point where I haven't touched a cigarette since then.
Wow, amazing. Exactly. And the thing is, Anne-Marie, our minds are so powerful. You know, one of the things I want the world to know is that we are expansive to such a degree we can't even imagine it. So when you look at the sky, or when you look at the sea, when you look at the stars, and you see this expansiveness, that's us. We are that. And in our day-to-day form and our day-to-day life, we don't see that because we live in a much more restricted, limited way of thinking about the world. So we don't touch that expansiveness, but it exists within us. So in that, like, lightheartedness is a brilliant tool. In that lighthearted moment, that gave you the space. And so if somebody tried to help you, well, don't have cigarettes, you know, chew gum instead or whatever, that wouldn't have helped you. You would have got even tighter.
Yeah.
And actually by her just doing that, and, you know, I remember that it was such a levity around it, that you were able to have an insight that changed. You know, you gave up smoking. I mean, it's pretty huge.
When I was in the train coming here, I was reading your book, as I mentioned earlier, and you were talking about the mind spas, and I've been to one of your mind spas before. So how did the idea for the mind spas come about?
Yeah, good question. So again, I think that we have way more creativity than we ever really realise. And I've certainly been guilty of thinking, well, how can I make this work, and how can I make that happen, and I need to make a living, you know, and so on, and getting really caught up in that. But when you let your mind be free and you just try things, because I talk a lot about inspired action, so you have ideas all the time, and you're a brilliant example of inspired action, can I just say. When you get an idea, if you just act on it, you get to find out if it works or not.
Yeah.
And you often get to learn something, and not all of them pan out. And Mind Spa was one of them. It was an idea initially. When we were doing the prison work, we also wanted to work with the officers and the staff. And we did a little, Paul Locker and I did that, and we did a little bit of work with the officers and the staff. And it was okay. You know, it wasn't brilliant. There was a lot of resistance, and we much preferred working with the guys. Sorry, staff. And we thought, you know, how can I improve this? Well, what can I do? And I thought, well, why don't I invite them to come, but invite other people as well? So other social entrepreneurs, other people that work in the field, you know, whoever. And so I opened it up. And it was like a raging success. We just had, you know, some people paid, some people didn't, whatever. And we ran 8 in the end, I think. And by the 8th one, it was getting profitable. But it wasn't profitable until then. But we also wanted to run it in a nice place, but we didn't want a hotel.
No.
I really don't like, you know, courses in hotels and
Too
things.
corporate, isn't it, really?
Too corporate. And it's horrible carpets.
Yeah.
They're always horrible carpets that make your eyes go funny, and horrible coffee. So we wondered where would we do it, and there's a turning near by the prison down this wild country road, and it had like a little sign, and I kept thinking, what is down there? And I drove down there one day, and you go down, and now it's paved, but it was all like rough when we first did it. And I was driving halfway down, and I thought, this is going nowhere, you know, I'm like locking my doors. Anyway, it was an equestrian centre, and they had a cafe. So I went up to the cafe, and it was like amazing views across Warwickshire. And just out the window of the cafe, there was a little area where some young people were doing polo, riding on ponies, doing polo. And it was beautiful. And then I lifted my gaze, and you could see the polo players there. And across the fields, I could see I-wing of the prison. And it was such a juxtaposition to see, here are my guys all locked up, and here are these people free on ponies, and neither have any idea of each other. It was just a bit of a mind, F. And I thought, I want to run it here because there's something about the energy of here that I want to like send the vibes over to the prison. So we ended up running it at the Mine Spa, and it was really, really cold because we had a couple in the winter. It was really cold, so we used to bring in boxes of blankets and get really cozy and stuff. They were good, right?
Yes, they are good. Yeah.
Really, really enjoyed running them, and we haven't run any since COVID, but I'm thinking about taking them up again next year.
I mean, I was lucky in as much as I did mine in summertime. I remember doing it, I think it was late summer, August, September time maybe, 2019 I think. But yeah, so you could go for a walk because it's really nice countryside as well. So lunchtime was having a walk down the canal and that sort of thing. So yeah, saying hello to the horses, and some people feeding them polos and things like that. So yeah, it's nice. Yeah, particularly if you're a horsey person, if you like the country, it's really nice. Yeah, and it's just nice. It's unlike anything else I've been to before, where I think as human beings, I do, if there's silence, you feel like you need to fill it, and feel like you need to say something. People don't like sitting in silence, whereas it was a space where you're totally comfortable just to sit in silence, and then if something pops into your head, then just say it, and it doesn't matter what it was.
Yeah, I loved that, and I have to attribute that to Paul. He was really good at bringing that. And I really see, in fact, I've just run a writer's retreat this weekend, and the silence and the stillness was part of it. I really see that, our lives are so busy, our minds are so busy all the time. We don't allow that space, and there's such a lot of value in the silence.
Yeah.
And I've never experienced that I sit in silence and then I get this, mind-blowing idea or anything. But it's almost like the silence and the stillness fertilizes the ground, and it fertilizes the ground of my mind for the good ideas. And just by having that time, I mean, I've been super, super active and busy and creative this week. And I think it's because I've had that time of stillness. And I've learned that, the best stuff comes from there, and just slowing down. And I'm a person who has to keep learning it over and over again. So, but I've learned that slowing down and just taking time. And it can look like whatever you want it to look like. So it can look like some people meditate, some people pray, some people want to go walking in nature, some people go to the gym or ride a bike or whatever. It can look like however you want it to look. And there's no form, but so long as you give yourself that time and that space, and as I say, it's a lesson that I learn over and over again, and just go a little bit deeper each time. And all the best stuff comes from there, basically.
Yeah, mine is taking the dog for a walk, and I didn't have a dog when I first knew you, and she's just turned 4 now. Wow. Shows you how time goes, doesn't it? I know. Oh no! I nearly wore my dog's trust socks today, but I chose against it. Wasn't sure that it would go with the ensemble. So what's next on the horizon for you anyway? What have you got planned in the near future? Anything?
When I was writing Wing of an Angel, I actually was published in 2 other books. So I partake in collaboration stories. So I'm in 2 other books, and now I help bringing those books into the world. So I do some book marketing for people, and I've also got stories in various other books, one in Danish.
Wow.
And Wing of an Angel has been translated into Czech.
Wow.
Yes, that's pretty cool, and it's going to be translated into Russian. And so, yeah, that's quite exciting. And it's had a little bit of a lull in the last few months. I found out today I've sold nearly 500 copies, and I found out today that means I'm in the top 3% of authors, because most people don't sell more than 300 copies. So
wow,
that's good. So what's next is I've got revitalised in putting Wing of an Angel into the world a little bit more. I'm speaking at a Health and Wellbeing Resilience Conference in October, and I'll be signing books there and so on. And I'm thinking about a US book tour for 2026.
Wow, my goodness.
Yeah, so it might have to be republished and so on, but that'll be interesting. But before then, I would like to produce some companion books. So Wing of an Angel is a story, but it has lessons. And I want to pull out the lessons and produce a sort of coaching style books for people that maybe are more accessible, that could go with Wing of an Angel, but also could stand alone as well. So my intention is to produce 3 of those next year. And because I create digital products. So I am creating some audio products for a platform called Insight Timer, and I'm creating some digital courses at the moment. So I want to sort of produce some books that will go with those so that people just make them very accessible and helpful to people along the journey, because we're all starting at different places.
And one thing I'd like to point out, I know you're down as Jacqueline Hollows there, but it's JB Hollows if people want to purchase your book, isn't it?
Author, yeah, I'm JB Hollows, yeah, because I wanted it to be not male or female, and also J.K. Rowling.
Exactly,
you know,
yeah, so well, got to compete with the best, haven't you?
Exactly, yeah.
Do you think you'll go into any other form of writing, like a novel or anything like that?
Yeah, I fancy taking some time out, when at some point, and writing some stories about what the genre that I'd like is crime. So crime, something in prison, but with a psycho, what do they call it? Paranormal.
Oh, right, okay.
With a paranormal twist.
Well, I'd be buying that one. I'd like.
The house that we walk past where I live, and me and my husband hates this house. It's been built, and he really hates it. And he said drug dealers live there. And I was saying, oh, well, what it is they've built a tunnel to the prison. And actually, in actual fact, what they're doing is they're flooding the prison with, it looks like it's drugs, but it's actually real helpful homeopathy treatments. And so all the people in prison are becoming very healed and well. And, I went off on this whole story, and he said, you can tell you're a writer. But I would love to write something like that. I'd love to have the time, not the time, but, just the space to write some exciting crime stories. And Stephen King always says, write what you know, write about what you know. And I know that world, and I've heard lots of interesting stories. And so I'd like to sort of use them and, do it.
But when you, as a writer, how are you disciplined? Do you do like a 9-to-5 stint each day? Do you do like little spurts each day? How do you go about writing a book?
So everybody's going to find their own system and their own process. For me, when I wrote Ring of an Angel, and I think I would do this again if I took on a big project like that. Wing of an Angel, I think, is over 80,000 words, so it's a pretty hefty project. I had to create a writing ritual. So I see that things progress when you put a little bit in every day. You don't have to do a massive stint. If you have just 10 minutes and you put that 10 minutes towards your project, that's 10 minutes every day that adds up. And so if that's an hour every day, even better. That's better than not doing anything at all. And I'll do it when. So if you have the thought, I'd like to write, and you think, well, I'll do it when I've retired, or I'll do it when I haven't got a 9-to-5 job, or when I've finished college, or whatever, when my children are grown up, you'll never do it. But actually what you have to do is create a writing space. What I found was that if you create a writing space, and even if you don't write in that space, you end up just somehow nurturing the writing that is to come. So I had a little ritual. I got up at 6. I would be in my little writing space by 7, and I would have an hour in that space. And sometimes I had to restrict it down to 10 minutes, and sometimes I had a lot longer. But I would wrap up warm, because I always remember writing everything in the cold. But anyway, wrap up warm. I would light a candle. I would have a nice flask of ginger and lemon on the side, and what's it called? Apple cider vinegar in there as well. So, healthy drink, and then I would sit down to write. Sometimes I would hand write, sometimes I would go on the computer, but I would be in the headspace of I'm writing. I'm not editing. I'm not planning, I'm writing. So I didn't care about spelling or accuracy particularly. And that helps if you handwrite, because I found that if I was typing, I couldn't help but just go back and change things. So I created a little sacred space for the writing. And if I would go to write and I wouldn't feel the urge or nothing would come to mind or whatever, I would just sit in that space with my book, curled up, looking at the sun coming up or whatever, and just take that space for myself, for the silence. And that nurtures the soul. And when the writing's ready to come, then it comes. The other thing that I recommend is that you literally don't switch on the editor in your head until it's finished. Wing of an Angel went through 5 or 6 different revisions, and I never knew that. I thought you write a book and that's it. It's like maybe you do a bit of editing, but it went through 5 or 6 revisions. So just let the editor go. Just go wild, write whatever comes to you. And in a way, what happens is the story knows when it's finished. And there were breaks. The reason why it took me 4 years is not because I'm a slow writer, but actually there were times, like the time when I had to put the book in the manuscript back in the drawer, is there were times where I'd go for months and nothing would be coming. So let it have that space to breathe, because it knows when it's ready. And if you think about it, I started it in 2019 and I published in 2023. Well, actually, COVID happened during all that time. And actually, we're not in prisons anymore, apart from with our distance learning program. And my whole entrepreneurship has changed. I wouldn't have known all of that. So you have to let the project have the space. And then there was one more thing that I would say is hone your craft. Like, I went to writing school during this time. I got interested in writing. I read other people's stories. I got interested in how it all works. So you have to hone your craft, but then just go to you and write like you talk and tell your story in the way you want to tell it. And that's the best writing, really. Oh yeah, there was one other practical thing, which was I always had what I was going to do the next day ready, so that I didn't sit down and think, oh, where was I again? I would have, right, tomorrow, write about Angel, let's say. Now, I might not do that when I got to that space, but because I'd given myself a task, it meant that I never sat down with, I don't know where to start. I always felt like I've got something that I could start with. And sometimes, you go off somewhere else and you write something else, and that's okay. And I would find that because I gave myself half an hour to 45 minutes, and sometimes I'd look up 3 hours later and go, oh, wow, I'm still here. I couldn't write all day. I'm not, that wouldn't suit me. And I really respect people who can. But having a good writing stint really helps sometimes to get the download.
So did you ever suffer from writer's block, or is it just a case of if nothing came, you just wouldn't bother writing that day?
That's right. So writer's block is just getting in your own way. And if nothing came, exactly right. If nothing came, I just didn't worry about that. And it might be sometimes I sat and doodle. Sometimes I'd think, oh, you know what? I'll write down some insights, or I had my room set up so that I had all the wall was covered with all the journey and so on. And I would just not worry about it. And sometimes then I would actually put the book away and think there's just really nothing now for a while. And then I'd get a nudge, oh yeah, you could write about this, and I'd come back to it.
Because you've spent a lot of time working in prisons, would you work in any other field, do you think?
I loved working in prisons. I think that time is over. I love now training other people who want to work with that population.
Oh, okay.
And that's part of what I'm doing in Florida is training some people. I love working with social entrepreneurs and change makers and heart-centered leaders who want to make a difference but struggle. Often those people struggle with burnout, overwhelm, and not feeling acknowledged. And I love working with them and helping them, first of all, recognise what burnout is, self-care, and also uncover even more potential within them. And I feel that by working with those people, they go on and impact the people that I've loved working with for such a long time.
Like a drip effect, or
Sort of almost like a bigger ripple effect, if you like.
Effect, that's probably the best word,
because if you impact, someone who's working in the care system, for instance, then you're impacting the whole of the care system in a way. And I really saw that a couple of years ago, that's the place now for me to go. And it touches on, actually, you never think of yourself as being, well, I haven't. I've never thought of myself as being an expert or being anything. Like, I never thought I'd write a book. And in actual fact, we're just capable of way more. And, there's a tendency, I don't know whether it's a female thing or what, but there's a tendency to play small. And you don't see that you're doing that. But when you see that you're doing that, you think, well, what else then? What else can I do? And I'm a multi-passionate, so I do many things. And I also just like to experiment, and I learn by doing. So I'm happy to jump into things and try them out.
And I know we can get your book on Amazon and Kindle. I'm just curious from my own personal point of view, but if a writer was to publish on Amazon and Kindle, do you get less money if somebody...
Yeah, so there's the whole business of being a published author is a whole nother subject. And I think if I'd have known about it, I wouldn't have ever written. but now I do. I enjoy knowing about it. So no writer gets rich off a couple of books. Someone like Stephen King, J.K. Rowling, etc., obviously, that's their business. But most authors do other things. So most authors are doing speaking events or running courses, doing Patreons, etc. So, very rarely do you just get enough royalties. So Wing of an Angel, for instance, is $13.99 on Amazon, and I make about £2 something off of that. So the royalties are very slim. I think with the Kindle, the royalty is slightly higher.
All right, that's interesting.
So the Kindle's cheaper, but you get a little bit more of royalty because they don't have to print it.
All right, okay.
So obviously they have to print it and ship it. Yeah, that's so you get slightly, but it's not like massive.
No.
Direct sales, obviously you get paid a little bit more because I can buy them at cost, which is about £6, including the postage, and I could sell it at £10 or £11. So you get a little bit more that way. And then there's all sorts of things. So there's different marketing techniques that people can use. What I would say is, if you want to write a book, write a book. But think about, what do you want that book to do for you? So Wing of an Angel, for me, I want that. I want Wing of an Angel to establish me as a thought leader, to open the doors to speaking opportunities, to grow my client base, my mentoring base, and to sort of leapfrog me into other writing projects. So Wing of an Angel has done its job, because immediately I've spoken at several places this year around the world. You know, I've been to Prague, and I'm going to Florida in October, and to Prague twice, and I can't even remember where I've been now. But I got opportunities off the back of writing Wing of an Angel, which is exactly what it's for. But it could be that you want to write your book because you want it to go. I know someone I've worked with who wants their book to go in all the addiction centres for free, you know, so it could be that that's what you want it to do. So think about what you want it to do for you, because that's what a book is good for. Being a published author is something that not everybody has done, and so it opens doors. So you just think about, what doors do you want to open? And I'd like more paid speaking events, for instance, and you then get the credentials because you've got something to talk about. So that's one thing. And I would also just make sure, work with someone that can help guide you through the publishing process, because although these days you can publish your own book on Amazon, you can tell a self-published book compared to a professionally published book. You don't have to work with a traditional publisher. There's lots of indie publishers like the one I work with that can help you with that, but it's well worth doing it. And then there is one way, because as you know, I ran a Kickstart campaign to publish Wing of an Angel, and that covered all my publishing costs. Wow. I made £140 profit, but all the publishing costs were covered. So the costs of the formatting and the edits and, you know, all of that were all covered by that Kickstart. So that's worth looking into as a way of funding the project.
So what does Kickstart do if somebody's watching this and doesn't know anything about Kickstart? What exactly is it?
Kickstart is a crowdfunding platform, and because it suited me, because I love creating community and building communities, and I wanted to take those people on that journey with me. And so crowdfunding is about taking the crowd with you as part of the journey, and then it's the crowd really that produced the end result. So it's a platform where you tell them what your project is, and then they can buy the book for more than they would pay afterwards. Like, for instance, I can get hardbacks and things like that. And but it's because they're supporting your campaign. So it's a really neat way of publishing a book. And it gives you a second launch as well. So I had my first launch on Kickstart, and then I had another launch, which I sort of messed up actually, because I had it a month after my Kickstart, but I was so worn out from the Kickstart campaign that I didn't really launch it properly on the second launch. But if I launch again in the States.
And are you writing anything at the moment?
So I'm doing a little bit of creative writing just for myself, and I am just about to start a new publication on Substack, and I'll be writing for that on a regular basis. I'm pretty much always writing, but it's more for business related purposes. And my intention is to publish 3 coaching books. So I'm already sort of bringing those to mind. In fact, I'd love to publish a book called Your Pace or Mine, because I've been seeing a lot around. I had a situation recently which really highlighted that we have all sorts of different human experiences, and none of them are right or wrong. They're just, we all have different experiences. And in this situation, it was quite an emotive situation, and people had lots of different opinions. And there was someone who was really struggling and some of these other people were saying, oh, we'll do this and we'll galvanise and we'll do all these things. And this person really struggled. And she was saying, I don't want to do those things, and what's wrong with me? And I worked with her, and I said, well, actually, that's okay. You don't have to. Like, trust yourself. You're where you're at right now. So just allow yourself to have that experience, and if it changes, it changes. And that really helped that person. And it keeps occurring to me in different situations. And I thought it'd be good to have a sort of your pace or mine. So you go at your pace, not at my pace, type of coaching book. So we'll see.
And if anybody wants to contact you, because I'm going to wrap this up now, where can they find you?
They can find me at Jacqueline at jbhollows.co.uk, and that's my website. But if you Google my name, Jacqueline Hollows, you pretty much can find me everywhere. So
the one and only Jacqueline Hollows. Famous. Okay, well, thanks for joining me, Jacqueline, and good luck with your future endeavours on your writing and teaching and speaking and everything else.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And bye from me and Jacqueline. Bye.